In today's video, another edition of the Toronto real estate question and answer, where I answer some of the questions you have asked me under my posts, under the videos, in my DMs, and elsewhere. Let's get to it. Hello everyone, this is Sam from SaberiSixRealEstate and Remax Realtron Realty Inc. As always, back with another video for you guys here today before we get into this edition of the Q&A, where I answer your questions with regards to the Toronto real estate market and the GTA real estate market. Feel free to subscribe, comment, rate, and review. Your support in that regard is, as always, greatly appreciated, but obviously you're not obliged to do so whatsoever. And if you have any further questions, feel free to get in touch with me. You can find my contact information in the description box with regards to my Gmail, my Instagram, my office. Feel free to go find that, ask your questions, or if you need any help with regards to the Toronto real estate market whatsoever. Anyways, enough of that. Let's get to the first question. Question number one, do you foresee a drop in condo prices? I personally do not foresee a major drop in condo prices anytime soon. Can there be a minor drop in prices into 2022? Perhaps. One of the contingent factors here is the interest rates. If the Fed decides to increase rates even by as little as 0.25%, that obviously has impacts on the selling side and the buying side of things. And if rates go up even minimally so, now obviously I'm not saying this is gonna happen, but one of the possible scenarios, certain sellers and investors who are in variable will further be incentivized to potentially list depending on their cash flow situation, how much they put originally down. And at the same time, on the demand side of things, possibly, once again, I'm not saying this will happen, this is one of the possible scenarios, a certain amount of demand will be removed. So in that case, you have a possible scenario where supply will exceed demand. Now, I'm not predicting anything like what we saw at the beginning, at the start of the worldwide event into October, November of last year, where the condo market did bottom out due to that very thing of inventory exceeding demand in terms of condominiums, right? That's why prices fell. So if this were to happen, I only still see a small drop in prices. Now, what has happened thus far, because this is being recorded as of October 3rd, condo prices overall have pretty much stayed even and the condo market has cooled down a bit. In my previous video, the weekly condo market update, I covered the prices in downtown, midtown, North York, and what we saw was overall marginal increases of 1% or so. And where there was a dip, there was a marginal dip of 1% in North York, for instance. North York, in that video, I made clear when we account for the eastern and western portions of North York. Central North York, when we just isolated Central North York, we saw actually it was still up 1%. Adding on top of that, let's take a look at per square foot prices and the number of transactions since June. In June, in the city of Toronto, this only applies to the city of Toronto. In June, there was about 1,300 transactions with an average per square foot price of 922. July saw a dip in transactions all over, really, honestly. And this trend goes across all over the market for freehold properties as well. There was a dip in inventory and sales. And I talked about the freehold portion of the dip in inventory in more freehold oriented videos. But here in July, we went from 1,300 transactions to 1,074, with also a dip in the per square foot price, down to 917 PSF. August, we continue to see that dip down to 1,024 transactions, so only 50 transactions less, but nonetheless, a further dip in the PSF, the per square foot price, down to $913 per square foot. Now, September, things were actually back up a bit, both in terms of transactions, up to 1,090 transaction, and the PSF price was back to 917 per square foot, across, once again, average across all condo types in the city of Toronto. So once again, when we look at average sold price, as we did in the preceding video, we're looking at per square foot price. From both views, we have seen, at least with regards to the city of Toronto, we have seen a cooling of the market. Now, obviously, going into the winter months, I think prices will increase a tad bit, but at the end of the day, I can't predict prices. I can't predict trends. All I can do is do my best to project, right? Anyways, moving on to the next question, which asks, what do I think of the House of Assembly condos in the Junction? Admittedly, the Junction is not my area of expertise. but I did take a quick look at the House of Assembly condos, and I had before as well, but it's not one of those projects that I really took a deep dive on. When I took a look at the project, it seems like a decent project. Some of the 1+1 dens there are really, priced really well. It's pretty decent prices for pre-cons, although it's not obviously downtown. It's still in the city. It's still somewhat central when we take into account the GTA, right? It's not Mississauga, right? It's not Scarborough. It's not as north as King City. There's certain, condos in King City. So although within the context of Toronto, most people may not think it's a central location, it's still a decent location, obviously. And that price per square foot is pretty good. But one thing I noted is they're asking for $78,000 for parking spots. And and if you're a regular viewer of this channel, you know how enthusiastic I am about parking spots, how bullish I am about parking spots. And here, I won't go as far as to say the parking is overpriced, but there's certain, projects downtown Toronto where parking is more scarce that are asking for less for parking spots. So here, $78,000 is quite a hefty price for parking. Now in the resale market, downtown, certain parking spots sell for $80K, rarely $90,000. Certain projects north of the city in Richmond Hill, for instance, they're asking for like 45 to 65, somewhere around there. So definitely safe to say $78K for the House of Assembly condos, a big ask. Yet, believe it or not, I would still consider going towards the parking here. If you're buying purely for resale value down the line, a parking spot really does make a huge difference. The next question number 3. What's your view on buying a studio as a first-time home buyer? Of course, one can save more money and go for a one bed, but I think choosing a studio can be advantageous as one can get into real estate market faster while paying less for down payment and monthly costs, and therefore save more money. Thoughts? This came after a discussion I had in the comments with this individual and several others actually via DM and Gmail, and which led me to make a separate video just on studios versus one bedrooms. Historically, as background, to give you a little background, if you're a regular viewer of this channel, you would realize historically I've been a little too negative on studios. Some people disagree with me. Some people say no, studios do make for great investments. After the back and forth and sitting down and going through some of the numbers more in depth, I realized that all the reservations I had about studios, all the hesitations I had with regards to studio condominiums were legitimate cons and legitimate deterrences as to why I thought studios were not good investments. But what I did undervalue or underrate is the positive side of things. So I have come more so into the middle ground now, where I still believe you can do better than a studio. The best one bedroom condominium will bring you better returns in the long run in terms of pure proceeds of sale than a studio unit will do. But obviously studio units have their positives as well, which I discussed at length in that video. So go watch that video. Quickly to answer this question, if you're talking about a first-time home buyer from a end user's perspective, would I recommend studios? Largely depends on your lifestyle and if you're okay with the small space you will receive. As an end user, as long as you are okay with the lack of space and the lifestyle that will come with that, the cramped nature, you don't have too much furniture, you're more likely to be a younger individual, perhaps a student, or in that demographic. And down the line, you have to think down the line, even though you're not an investor, you're still an end user, you still have to think down the line for appreciation purposes. Down the line, if you're okay with it potentially sitting on the market longer than every other condominium type, and if you can enact a little bit of patience about reselling it, then of course a studio will be the best option for you. It's the cheapest option, and it's a great way for you to enter the real estate market and finally own something under your own name. Assuming, once again, all those things, all those conditions have been fulfilled. You're okay with the lack of space. You do have patience in terms of potentially reselling it down the line. I'm not going to go through the whole entire investor side of the debate. Once again, one of the things studios offer you is cash flow. Assuming you are working with minimal down, 15 to 20% down. When we look at one bedrooms versus studios, studios cost far less to purchase, but the rental yield is almost equal to what bedrooms are. So if you put 15 to 20% down, you stand a better chance of operating at even or even marginal gain in terms of cash flow, whereas with 15 to 20% down for one bedrooms, you're most likely going to be operating at a loss. But once again, if you work with a real estate agent who knows what they're doing, or you yourself are an expert in the city of Toronto, know which buildings, which areas, what condo types, what layouts, all that, take everything into account. The best 1-bedroom condominium, or the best 1+1, or the best 2-bedroom will outperform an expertly picked studio in the long run. That is to say, everything else being equal, the best 1-bedroom will bring you more returns than the best studio in terms of sheer proceeds from sale. Question number 4, are there any detached pre-con builders you would recommend? Now, a lot of the detached builders that I'm most acquainted with are the boutique custom home builders, where they don't really build, a whole entire development's worth of detached. The ones that I'm most acquainted with and have the most inside knowledge with that are building boutique custom homes, detached homes where they're buying bungalows, tearing down the bungalow, dividing the lot, building two-story detached properties, and more so doing it in Midtown Toronto and North York, Central North York. Smaller scale, these are the builders, these are the detached builders that I have the most knowledge of. Now, in terms of bigger names, in terms of bigger corporations and bigger builders that do pre-con detached and townhome freehold properties that I can recommend to you, here are some of the following. Daniels usually does really good work in terms of townhomes. From my experience, everyone's experience differs, but Daniels has provided good product and they've always been very responsive. Minto Group does some great work as well, although from my experience, they're not as renowned and good as Daniels, but Minto Group has done some great work as well. One thing I can say though is definitely stay away from Mattamy Homes. Now, I've personally never had a bad experience with Mattamy Homes, but when I look at my colleagues and when I hear stories and just, being a fly on the wall and observing other people's experiences and trends and, what happens in my office. And once again, those who have taught me in this business, told me experiences when I was learning the ropes, just most testimonials. Mattamy Homes is not the best builder to go towards for pre-con properties. They're cheap builds, basic models, not very responsive, and once again, it's better to stay away from Mattamy Homes. Although I personally have not had a bad experience with them one-on-one because I've always avoided them. But maybe your experience was good. Tell me if you've had a good experience with Mattamy Homes. I'd be happy to hear that. Question number 5, you always stress the importance of parking spots with units, but in downtown, there's immediate access to transit. Why overpay if you don't need parking or you don't drive? Well, this is a innocent question, but come on, man. Let's think a bit here. Even if you don't drive, even if you are in downtown, which once again, you have immediate access to transit of all kinds, streetcars, buses, the go stations, so the train, obviously the subway, taxi cabs, Uber. Even if that's the case, you still should buy a parking spot, because when it comes time for you to resell your unit, you will see your lack of parking spot reflected in how much you can sell it for. If you have a beautifully kept, clean 1+1 unit that was expertly picked in every other scenario, even then you should still purchase a unit with a parking spot, because guess what? If you're not going to use it, there are people who need parking, and parking is scarce. And at the end of the day, guess what? Parking is land, and land is scarce. There's only a finite amount of land on the planet Earth. It's not infinite, right? Okay, good. So as long as we agree there's a finite amount of land that exists, and a finite amount of that finite amount of land can be used for parking in a metropolis such as Toronto, people will always need parking. And guess what you can do? While you're up there in your 1+1, and you're not using the parking, you're taking the train every day to work, or you're biking every day to work, guess what? You can rent out your parking. And guess what? That's going to pay for the utilities and the maintenance fees and the groceries. Let's say you don't want to rent out the parking lot. Let's say you do not want to deal with a tenant. Well, guess what you can do? You can sell your parking spots. upwards of 40, 50, 60K. Earlier in the video, we were just talking about how pre-con builders, at least in the house of assembly condos, are offering spots for $78,000. Now that's high, but certain spots downtown, now this is not happening every day, but certain spots downtown go for $90,000, $80,000. On the low floor of that, on the lower end of the spectrum, you have spots that go for $35,000 to $40,000, right? So if you're not gonna use it, you can rent it. If you don't wanna rent it, you can sell it. And if you don't wanna do either one of those, when it comes time to resell your property, the fact that you have a parking spot is gonna go so far, you have no idea. And in certain scenarios, if you have a 1-bedroom that's 600 to 700 square feet, with a parking spot versus a 1+1 that's 800 to whatever, 850 square feet, and everything else is equal in terms of and everything else is pretty much equal in terms of, exposure, and everything else is equal in terms of exposure. And everything else is pretty much equal in terms of exposure, layout, where it is in the unit, the building, if it's a good building, all that. In certain scenarios, the 1-bedroom that's smaller with parking is gonna sell more than the 1+1. So in summary, buy parking. Even if you don't use it, even if you don't need it, it's in your best interest to buy a unit with parking. Anyways, if I did not answer your question in this video, rest assured I have seen your question and I'm going to answer it in a future video. Anyways, thank you very much for watching. As always, you can find my contact information in the description box with regards to my Gmail, my Instagram, and my office. Feel free to get in touch with me with any questions you may have. And subscribe, comment, rate, and review. Your support in that regard is greatly appreciated. As always, later in the week, around Wednesday, we're going to have a TREB resale market report. So stay tuned for that. And as always, Fridays, we have our weekly condo market update. Thank you very much for watching. Stay safe and stay tuned. Thank you.